in South Africa, you're very connected to tribal elders, and you're very connected to a culture of, it may not, that's not the norm of South African culture as a whole, but within South African culture, there's a culture of tribal elders and initiation systems, which you just told me that you've been connected to that. Actually, your first initiation ceremony was when you were 7 days old. So would you say that that does support that? It does support purpose?
The best way to explain it is that, of course, Africa is huge, and we've got many initiation systems. So it would be very difficult to point any particular system, whether it's West African, Southern African, North African, but the essence is the same. All of them, if you go through all of them, the essence is the same. To answer your question, from my particular culture, at home, we are called Bantu people, or in the ancient Egyptian language, Kenti or Kentu Amenti people. What that means is that you belong to Ndu, you belong to consciousness. You are of consciousness. Then there is a saying which says, you are a sovereign being, I'm a sovereign being. You are because I am. You might have heard about the concept of Ubuntu. So Ubuntu simply means I am because you are because I am. So the African ontology is very difficult for us to say this is my personal space, because of the understanding that we are inherently interconnected. So I cannot even talk of my personal purpose without saying my purpose is connected to a purpose, to his purpose. That's our understanding of purpose. The moment I say this is my personal purpose, it's almost like I'm ripping myself off the fabric, the very fabric that actually makes us humanity, or makes us a nation, if it's at nation level, or makes us a society. I didn't grow up having that. I started having that kind of thinking only when I went to school, because we had a Dutch Roman type schooling system, whereby then we're encouraged to be individuated. You only think about yourself. It's competitive, so whoever competes with you is your enemy. Whereas when I go back home, my purpose is worthless if it's not connected to someone else's purpose, and that's how I live today. That's my personal journey. If I have to personalize it, that my personal purpose is connected to everyone else's purpose.
Thank you, Ron. Naomi, how would you, I mean, you are deeply connected to ancient Chinese self-development and awakening systems, but you were saying to me also those weren't so present for you as you were growing up. Would you say, how accessible is that in the culture that you grew up in? How close were you to that? How available was that for you as you were growing up in China?
Actually, for the past, let's say over 60 years, and our own culture, the traditional culture, had been lost very much. But recent years, and more people start awakening. And then there's many people around me and in my area start to do something to get our culture back. There are many private schools. They follow the old education system to teach children, like a small private private school. Many around. So, and also they give teachings on these classics about like great learning, doctrine of Ming, and even the Tao Te Ching, maybe you may hear it, the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, and even Heart Sutra, like these classics, and many others. So I'm happy to see that our people start to realize the value of our own culture. So for me, I'm actually, when I was young, I had no idea about this, about our own culture, about these classics. And because of the political reason, and the Confucius teaching had been pressed for many years. And it says something evil, and there's not mentioned school, even in the society, the feminists, and no one is allowed to read or to have these books even. So for many years, but recent years, maybe it's because the people's mind is changing. Even our president and start to realize that's the value of our own culture. So he start to support this promotion, this teaching. So now it's getting better. So for myself, I think after 2025, I start to get to know about these classics, and I start to learn from teachers and read these books. So I don't really get any influence from my family or from government when I was young. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just this question. You know, we did discuss a bit earlier that this issue of purpose is a bit complicated, because Bruce was talking about being crazy, you know, and I was wanting to say, you know, but we have a lot of crazy people, Trump, and there's crazy stuff going on in the world. So what sort of craziness are we talking about? And what sort of purpose are we talking about? But if we talk about purpose also being like a common goal, I would say, like I was in Iran recently, as John was mentioning, there was a strong sense of purpose there. I went to Rwanda just after the genocide, and Rwanda has been remarkable in the African context. I don't know if it's a good purpose, but, and look at Israel after genocide. So there is also that purpose, which I've seen in those countries, some sort of another type of purpose, but that's also another element of purpose. Those countries have had strong purpose to me in terms of a common goal, you could say. Countries like Iran living in those conditions politically, or having survived genocide like in Rwanda.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other insights or questions or inquiries that arose from your time together as a four? Okay. Yeah.
Hi. My name is Gavoy, and I wanted to directly go into the question that you asked, if there is any culture in the you ask about a community, sort of a culture, was a tribe or a, yeah, has purpose, yeah. Yeah. So for me, I don't feel like there is any culture in the world that has purposely, worked itself better than any other culture in the than all the cultures in the world, because I feel like the real purpose of a culture, all the cultures got purpose in it, and that is the reason why there is the maintenance. That is the reason why they've been passed from one generation to another, and that's the reason why until now we got a lot of information and we keep on building ourselves on it, and that's why we are actually right now breathing in what it created. So without the purpose of all these cultures, we couldn't be here also speaking of this, which is a great contribution to what we've been carrying since the birth, since what we've come to know as what we know now. So it is the contribution that all of these cultures have done, and that's the reason why we find ourselves here, and there is none of them that is higher than the other. It's just that in terms of extension, we can't go in other forms of, modules of understanding life to come with an extended sort of a knowledge, but in the end, they are still holding the purpose. They've still always been there, and we are only this because of these cultures that we sort of maybe might want right now to try to compare, but they've been open. They've been open to us. They've been leading us, and if we are listening and if we are open to understanding them even more better, then I think they have no limitation.
So I'd like to push back on that a little bit. So a focus I'd like us to address this question at is, I totally agree that all cultures have participated in some way in an evolutionary process, for sure. And that has expressed itself in different ways in different parts of the world. But a more focused question I'm interested to ask is, which cultures have more supported the blossoming and the full expression of the core of who we are? In a child, when a child is growing up, which cultures have actively supported, without fear and without avoidance, the flourishing of the core energy of that being? And which cultures have more repressed that? I did not grow up in a culture where the core of who I was supported. I had to fight for that, and I've grown strong in various ways from that fight, but it was a fight that had to happen. I'm sure it's probably the same for a lot of other people. So, I can see there's some comments now. So, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. I've got the microphone, so just a short, I rest my case. Thank you for saying that, John. And I couldn't agree more, like, what is the value of my purpose if I just see it for myself? So, I mean, it's the term as such for me is in connection with everything. From the word purpose, as I hold it, holds that within it. But my question was more like, in our education system, let's bring it down. Are we really invited to express who we really are from childhood on? And which culture does that? I don't know one, but maybe there is. So I'd be really interested. And again, I'm talking about the last 50, 60 years. Thank you.
I would like to just respond, if it's okay, because my daughter, we are in Germany, and my daughter, she's 9, and I'm just about to change school for her into a Rudolf Steiner or Waldorf school. So I'm just saying, to me, Germany in one way has at least a model. I'm sure there's a lot of issues with that too. I mean, there's issues with everything, but at least there's, in Germany, developed a type of methodology which I believe for my daughter will be quite encouraging. I'm sure there'll be trauma and all that, but anyhow.
Can I give it?
Yeah, different.
Thanks so much, and apologies for totally misunderstanding your question. I think if you're asking in general, both your questions are very, very good questions. In that, maybe we need a good purpose-based study to establish this. I don't think any one person can say they know for sure that that or this and that culture have a system which supports individuals' purpose from the time that the child is born. I can only speak of my own experiences. I was saying that even before we are born, we have diviners, for example, as one system. We have diviners who will be able to say, oh, according to whether you use cosmology of the stars, or whether you observe nature itself, this child is coming with this energy or is influenced by these energies. Therefore, when this child is born, society is encouraged to support that child to live according to what was seen. That's one. John also mentioned that the first initiation that I remember that I went through, I was 7 years old. Traditionally,
7 days.
7 days. 7 days old. I don't remember that one. But the first one that I remember was 7 years old. This is the initiation where, as young men, we taken to the forest. And this is where then the elders will observe how these young men, well, it's not even young men, it's young boys, how do they live together, but does this individual have the social traits, the physiological traits, the psychological traits, whatever natural proclivity that little boy has? Do all those things support the purpose? If not, then they will know that, this child is actually lacking in 1, 2, 3, and then such a person will be, he or she will be encouraged to actually follow that purpose. That's what I experienced. And as I said, I became schizophrenic when I had to go through the schooling system. And sometimes you had to go to church where you told you cannot do this, you cannot do that. My educational system also had a religious system. So I wouldn't even condone it as a system that supports purpose. The spiritual system or religious system also, I wouldn't condone it as a system that supported purpose. All that they were creating was modern day slaves. So fast forward 14 years, it's another initiation. Now I'm getting interested in girls, for example. So the elders need to get you together and say, look, this is how life is supposed to be. If you do this, this is what will happen. But remember, you have purpose. And then they determine again. They help you determine, why are you here? Why are you doing what you do?
So is this, you're talking about like purpose-based sex education, basically?
With it, at that age, then we get introduced to all sacred sexuality from the tribal context. At school, no, there was nothing. At school, you get told, you do this, you go into hell. Simple.
It's different, huh?
Simple. So with it, there are different initiations, and as men, as young men, then you go through the warriorship initiations, where you then become trained to be a warrior. And with it, you drop your old names. You come out with new names. Fast forward 21-year-old, another initiation. And all these stages, after every 7 years, you get reminded why you're here, because purpose is it's a dynamic thing. It cannot even be personalized and say, this is my purpose. It keeps on morphing and changing, and you need to keep on revisiting it. This is my personal experience. Whether we have systems on the planet in the past 50, 60 years that support this, I don't know. I only know what I've experienced, and I feel my particular culture, against all odds, where there was this onslaught of a system which wouldn't even allow you to use your own African name. You take someone else's name, you take their life away, you rip their life away. You take someone else's language away, they are totally lost. So,
could you share your names?
Yes. So, when I was still in the womb, I was given the name Nkomo wa Lwandle. Nkomo wa Lwandle means the gift of the ocean, which is related to the whales and the dolphins. That's the name of the unborn me. And in my village, I'm the first one that was cesarean, so they never knew cesarean section. So I was given the name Hlupeka, meaning adversity, because my mother went through cesarean section. Then I went to school, and then I had so many English names every year that we had to go back to school. Sometimes I was told I'm Peter, sometimes I was John, sometimes I was Ruth, even women's names, because we had to give them these names because they wouldn't allow us to use our African names. But anyway, then when I had to go for the warriorship, I became Zabula Mave. Zabula Mave, he who crisscrosses across the countries, traverses the countries, and it became my life experience. Then another name is called Kazimula, the shining one. It's almost like canceling the adversity. Then there is the name of my soul, of me as consciousness, and that's Aunkh Kemsma. That's an ancient Kemetic, ancient Egyptian name. I just use Aunkh for short.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Naomi, I'd like to bring it over to you. So would you say that your perspective on how purpose is being related to in modern day China is maybe similar to what Eirik was saying, that, you know, in Europe, in Germany, there's things like Steiner schools and some other countries as well. So there's a movement happening now, which is to kind of embrace this more and the potential, the inherent potential of a human being, but that hasn't been an unbroken line within culture. Is that how you'd say it? Would you agree with that or disagree?
You know, because the certain group of people, it's making effort and endeavors to promote the traditional culture. So more and more parents and believe that the traditional education system actually can help their children's growth better, like more comprehensive. So they even choose to send them to this private school rather than send it to them to the government school, and even with more cost. And so this is getting more and more, but still, I would say over 95% of the people still going to the government school, and they've been more realistic. They have to follow the system, and to be able to enter the university, or So this is the situation, but slowly I had this sense that government start to do something. At least they don't restrict. How you say it? Restrict the promotion, the studying of the traditional education system, but they didn't really do much to support, as I see it for now. But hopefully in the near future, some government school adopt a small part of traditional education programs, like one of the classic or part of the classic in the school. So this is the situation. And then Aunkh were talking about how he grew up, these initiations. Actually, we also have this system, but I never experienced myself. I only heard about it, read about from the books, and also we see this from the movie and TV series. And how
this associated with Kung Fu or Confucianism, or which tradition is associated?
It's more of Confucianism. And when the baby were 2, they have an initiation as a big celebration, which part of the ceremony is they prepare many like tools, toys, for the baby to pick up, But each item is represent, let's say, a direction or occupation in the future. So it depends on what he pick up, and they believe, okay, people pick up a book, maybe he might be a scholar in the future. So they would support more for them to study the culture. So if they pick up a tool like as a carpenter, for example, and then they believe they might very possibly will be a carpenter in the future, something like that. So, and at 10 is another big celebration and initiation. Also at 18, yeah. So names the same, many names. We at least 3 to 5 names in their whole life, and how people call them is depend on the relationship with this person and which name you choose to call him. So this is generally we have this kind of system in ancient China in the past, but now not so much. Still, we have people still do this, but not exactly like the people our ancestors did in ancient times. Yeah.
Thank you. We're just coming up to time, but so just something I want to take forward a little bit. Aunkh, I was really struck by you made a comment, you know, when you went to this kind of Christian school that you found yourself. You said basically this was about the creation of slaves. Yeah, and I'm just struck by whether young people are, whether we have a collective interest in young people's innate potential being fostered by the communities that they grow up in, or whether they're seen as commodities, you know, and that in, you know, there's been a huge kind of technological development process in the West that's allowed us to live with the quality of life that often we do, and I know, you know, where I come from in the UK, there was sometimes implicit and sometimes explicit pressure, which is like, so what are you going to do? Because then we know where in the workforce you're going to fit in to keep the economy rolling, because that's what's important, to keep the economic machine rolling. You know, so young people actually become commodified as things to keep the machine going. And that's totally different to, you know, something I said in the opening talk for this is purpose, as it very much sounds in what you're describing, you know, in ancient cultures and some modern cultures, always serves this two-directional flow between the individual and the tribe, where the tribe recognizes that it is for the benefit of the tribe for every individual to be supported in their full potential. It's going to be good for everyone if we do that. And it's the responsibility, therefore, of the tribe to support that in the individual. And that's something, you know, and there was this question here that I pushed back on a little bit, because it doesn't feel like we do that. You know, I think it's pretty fair to say that we don't do that, you know, as a culture, as a norm. So I'm going to bring this to time. Thank you so much to all of you for participating on this, and thank you so much for traveling to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's give it a round to our people.